Hi, I'm Owen, and I've been Splatoon free for a little over a year now. It was really hard at first, but then I got robbed of all my Splatoon stuff, so now, piece of cake. I've been using this time to go outside and enjoy nature more. It's just been a breath of fresh air. I think just give it a little bit more time, any urge to play Splatoon I would have ever had will be gone. I'll finally be Splatoon free. Hello, how are we doing tonight, everybody? Make some noise. Can I get a oh yeah? Octo expansion, the experimental fan favorite. Return of the Mammalians, which is Octo expansion for children. Also, I'm just gonna call it Splatoon 3. And Side Order, a Splatoon roguelite. These are my 3 favorite Splatoon campaigns, and the other 2 can wait their turns. Today, I'm going to compare all 3 campaigns to determine which one is peak Splatoon. And just a reminder, this is all my opinion, but it shouldn't really matter. It's not like I'm giving these points or anything. And with that, it's time to begin. Starting with Alright, pacing. Pretty simple. Just have to discuss how fast different parts of the game go by and how it's structured. Shouldn't be too hard. Side Order in Splatoon 3 start the campaigns with fakeouts. Splatoon 3's beginning mimics the Splatoon 1 and 2 hero mode campaigns, spawning directly into the level instead of going through a door, fighting Octavio. You know the drill. With Side Order, we start with a shorter tower that introduces the color chips, enemies, level types, and new mechanics. These both end with a boss fight where the boss eventually becomes an ally, then something that throws you into a different area. And then they tell the player that they're just getting started with the words Nintendo Presents. No 2 words have made me cry more. All Octo expansion makes you do is a quick tutorial stage and then you're right into the game. As soon as you beat the first level, you're immediately introduced to branching paths. This is the only campaign that has this strict of branching paths, with Splatoon 3 having more of an open world approach and Side Order being weird. And I know a lot of you want me to talk about Side Order, so I'm gonna put Octo expansion to the side for a few minutes so we can talk about it. After climbing the fake out intro, the main loop of climbing a tower with 30 floors is available. On a good run, the tower only takes an hour or 2 to clear. After clearing the tower once, people thought that the DLC was over and instantly started complaining about its playtime. I guess they missed the huge signs telling them to play more, like, oh, I don't know, the lockers that are introduced in the first 2 minutes of gameplay. As almost every promotion for this game said, the DLC is designed to be played over and over again. I guess people just thought that the devs were expecting them to die and have to restart more often. Well, guess what? If the first half hour was a fake out intro, then your first playthrough is the real intro to Side Order. It gets you comfortable with the game structure so you're prepared to play it 11 more times. When the devs said replayability, they meant that they want you to go through the tower 12 times using a different weapon in every run. And to get more weapons, you have to get keys from bosses to unlock lockers. Luckily, the game throws random assortments of levels at you, so it'd be nearly impossible to get the same string of them every time. You also need to get different color chips depending on the weapon, like the stringer and the charger. You're gonna need that quick charge. Some weapons even have their own color chips, which... Wait, this is sounding too much like a gameplay analysis. I gotta save all that for later. What I'm trying to say is that there's at least some justification for the devs expecting players to clear the tower multiple times. But surely this gets stale while playing. I mean, doing the same loop 12 times, that surely can't be fun. I want to talk about this more, but that's suited more for the gameplay analysis. Just know that for pacing, it's 12-hour-long runs that progressively get harder.
Now, is that good or bad? It's up to the player to decide, but personally, I enjoy my time with it. But enough about me. Let's get back to Octo expansion.
The branching paths aspect makes it kind of tricky to talk about pacing because depending on how you traverse the metro, your progression rate will vary. I can try to talk about CQ points, the currency you use to enter levels and what you get for clearing them. There's an obvious risk and reward mechanic at play here, with harder levels having higher entry fees, but giving out more points for completion. This can cause the player to get stuck on a challenging, expensive level and have to go across the map to go to a cheaper level to grind for points. But there's one problem with this system, and what I consider Octo Expansion's biggest flaw: the skip mechanic. If you fail a level twice, you're allowed to completely skip it all for the price of entry. But hey, at least there's some drawback for skipping. You have to pay a fee and don't get the stage's memcake, which prevents you from unlocking the secret final boss. It sure would be crazy if there was no penalty. In the escape segment, which are, in my opinion, the best parts of the game, you don't have to pay anything to skip. You just have to die 5 times and then you're good to go. However, you still can't fight the secret boss. And you can't just skip the secret boss. But you know what you can skip? The final boss. Free of charge, after 1 loss, while still being able to unlock the secret boss. I'm bringing up the story a topic early. In the Metro, you're able to skip levels because Marina can hack into the database of the company that runs the tests and trick it into thinking you've passed the level. It took some creative thinking from the story department to have it make sense. But in the escape segments, you're not supposed to be there. It's not a structured test. There's no way for Marina to hack anything that allows you to skip. So instead, it's portrayed as 8 being so determined that they take control from the player and do the work themselves. Now, if these levels were especially challenging, I'd understand this choice, but there are much more difficult levels in the Metro. I think it would have been a better decision for them just to not have a skip mechanic in these escape sequences. And if they just had to let you skip the final boss, maybe have the option available after a few more tries than 1. But ignoring that, Octo Expansion's pacing is all about exploration, finding the subway lines that lead you to the Thangs, which are the 4 collectibles you need to beat the game, yada yada. It'll be different for everyone depending on the route you take.
For my playthrough, the pacing was pretty good, but if you think my rant on skipping was long-winded, that's not even the worst pace-ruining mechanic in the series. That crown belongs to Splatoon 3's abundance of power eggs.
As much as it tries to hide it, Splatoon 3's map system is basically the same as 1 and 2's. It's just now, instead of the islands being apart from each other, they're connected by pipes. Since it's so similar, there shouldn't be that big of a change, right? Well, this campaign tried to incorporate parts of Octo Expansion along with the normal story mode. And what was a new mechanic in Octo Expansion? The paid gates. You had to pay CQ points to get in and get them for clearing the stage. The devs tried to bring this mechanic over to 3, using salmon eggs instead of points, but that's where they made a huge mistake. They added a burst clear bonus. Stop it, you're scaring him! And how much do most levels cost to enter? Like 30. And that's if there even is one. But this is where a new mechanic to Splatoon 3 comes into play, the fuzzy ooze. To progress, you've got to get rid of it, and to do so, you've got to use eggs. This is where most of the expenses come from, as these things can cost you upwards of 3,000 eggs. Sounds scary, right? Well, no, you get like 2,500 eggs with no expense for beating a boss for the first time. And most levels give at least 1k for a first clear. In fact, the first time I played the game, I skipped 2 entire islands because I got so many eggs early on. And I wasn't even going on my way to do so, I just wanted to fight Big Man. Now I can do that anytime I want. Also, it can be pretty easy to get around these blockades. Sometimes it's a tricky jump, but if you hit the kettle on the other side of it, you can just super jump to it. That means you need even less eggs. This is such a simple fix too, just make the clumps bigger. That's it. And with the problem at large, there are so many solutions that I'm surprised the devs didn't use any of them. Lessen the reward, raise the price of entry, make the ooze take more eggs to clear, or just get rid of the first clear bonus. But I think the best way to do this was what I was expecting while playing. A huge fee for going to the final stage. I thought that I'd have to use a few thousand eggs to get there, but just like every other boss, it was free. But hey, maybe they were just keeping with the whole motif of threes by giving this 3 hours of playtime.
So which game's pacing is the best? Not Splatoon 3's, that's for sure. Just so we can keep track of this, let's set up a scoreboard. Splatoon 3 gets 1 point. I'm sure the devs are very upset I didn't play into their little motif of putting threes everywhere. The Octo expansion and Side Order are going to be a bit hard to choose between, just because they're so different and definitely both have their own flaws. But I think I'm going to give it to Octo expansion, just because in comparison to Side Order, a lot more people can enjoy it. Not everyone likes going through the same tower levels 12 times in a row. You're going to find new levels in Octo expansion basically in every playthrough, and when we get to the gameplay section, you're going to understand why that affects Side Order so much. But why should you care? Are these all just random disconnected levels? Surely there's gotta be some kind of...
Let me make one thing clear. There's a difference between story and lore. Story is what's straight up shown in the game, and lore is the history of the world with some other background details. I'll be covering both of these in this section, but I'm still gonna mostly judge on story. Back when I made my video comparing Octo expansion and Splatoon 3, I did a stupidly oversimplified story explanation, so this time I'm gonna restrain myself by not making a single joke during the story summaries. These are meant to be taken seriously. Haven't you heard? This is Nintendo's darkest franchise. Stop having fun! June 13th, 2018. A DLC for the video game Splatoon 2 was released, titled Octo Expansion. The story follows an Octoling who has lost their memory and awakened in a mysterious underground metro. They are found by their former opponent, Captain Cuttlefish. However, their main rival, known as Agent 3, is nowhere to be found. They find a telephone. It tells them it needs 4 things, which they'll need to ride the metro to find. To get them, the Octoling, deemed Agent 8, teams up with Pearl and Marina to go through various tests, which... Part of this, aforementioned, is fighting peculiar green Octolings that don't seem to recognize Agent 8. This fails to hinder Agent 8's progressions, so they continue ing until they find the Thangs. Upon returning the aforementioned Thangs to the telephone, it assembles the pieces into a blender, which it attempts to use to kill Agent 8 and Captain Cuttlefish. However, Marina is able to call for help, summoning the captain's associate, Agent 3, who destroys the blender, resulting in him losing consciousness. He had blueprints to the underground facility with him, allowing Agent 8 to make an escape. However, a mysterious substance comes out from the telephone and possesses Agent 3, causing him to take Captain Cuttlefish as a hostage and initiate a battle between him and Agent 8. Fortunately, Agent 8 emerges victorious and can now easily take Captain Cuttlefish and Agent 3 to the surface, where Pearl and Marina pick them up by means of helicopter. But the telephone is not out of tricks. It reveals a statue previously hidden underneath a body of water, which has a large death ray in its mouth. It reveals that it was created by humans to preserve their knowledge and is called Commander Tartar. It is disgusted by the new creatures that inhabit the Earth, referring to Octolings and Inklings, so it deemed them unworthy of humanity's wisdom and plans to sanitize them all. This sanitization is what happened to the green Octolings, wiping their memories and brainwashing them to obey Tartar. Luckily, Agent 8, Pearl, and Marina are able to prevent the statue's death beam, causing the statue to explode with Tartar inside. And that is the story of Octo Expansion, the DLC for the Splatoon 2 game from for the Nintendo Switch family of systems.
Alright, are you happy? Are you ready for me to do that with the next two campaigns too? Yeah, that's what I thought. So I'll be going over these next two more casually. And let's go ahead and get Splatoon 3's out of the way. I wouldn't say it's complicated, but it's really convoluted.
It starts like any other Splatoon game. You gotta help Cuttlefish kill those dang Octarians. Thank goodness he's blind. But this time the leader of the Octarians, DJ Octavio, isn't to blame. The Octarians are no longer under his control, but obey the fuzzy ooze, a substance that turns things into mammals and can only be destroyed by your pet fish. Yep. Then you fall down a hole into a secret underground civilization that was previously run by humans with a giant rocket in the middle covered in fuzzy ooze. The Squid Sisters and Agent 3, who now just goes by Captain, are down there investigating, but when you fell, Octavio and Cuttlefish went missing. So now you gotta go to some signals around multiple sites to see if it's him, but nope, it's Deep Cut. Because they want treasure or something. I mean, they want treasure, which is great character motivation. So you beat them up and take their stuff, learn that Mr. Grizz from Pikmin 2 has Cuttlefish, and they're atop the rocket. So you use the junk you stole to make a drill to defuzz the rocket, then quickly become chill with Deep Cut, then climb the rocket to get Mr. Grizz, who killed Cuttlefish. Also, Mr. Grizz is a real bear, that's another thing for later. Actually, you know what?
I'm just gonna save everything for later, how about that? How about I do that and go get a life? Don't you just love video essays? I know I don't. Now I'm saying things I've already said 2 years ago.
Mr. Grizz reveals that he wants to have the world be ruled by mammalians once again, so he's taking a rocket ship filled with fuzzy ooze to space to crash into Earth. After he does that, we have a moment to honor the late Cuttlefish, who gets revived by a teardrop from the captain. I get this is because it rehydrates him, but that doesn't make it any less corny. Do you think people ship this?
Look, I'm sorry about my freak out earlier. I just need some way to relieve stress. Whoa!
But who cares about that old geezer? I know I don't anymore. There's a barren space about to kill everyone. Luckily, Deep Cut uses their pets to create a spiral all the way to space. Their pets are introduced in their boss fights, which I'll talk about later.
Ooh, I've said that twice now. I feel like a real video essayist.
You make it to the rocket, use small fry to eat some of the ooze on Mr. Grizz, which makes him fling you off into space. Then DJ Octavio comes out of nowhere to save you, which normally I try to be critical of, but to the devs' credit, they did set him up earlier, so I'll let it slide. Then Small Fry turns into Huge Fry because of weird tribal magic or something. I made a theory trying to explain it that you can go watch, but fair warning, it was during my high voice, higher hairline era. Huge Fry holds off Mr. Grizz so you and Octavio can finish him off before the rocket hits Earth. Then you go back to Earth. The end.
I told you this game had a complicated story. When I did Octo expansion, I purposely used really posh language, and this review was still longer than that. So let's go ahead and do side order. It probably shouldn't take too long, because its story is frustratingly simple. A lot of it is explained through lore, so this is probably going to seep into this summary somehow, or else it won't make any sense. That should give you a hint how this DLC was received.
We start off with Agent 8 in a weird, colorless city for Pearl, who is a drone for some reason she doesn't know. The two start looking around for Marina and figure that she's probably at the top of the very obvious tall glitching tower. They go in and some spooky fish pop out of the weird portals. Pearl gives 8 some dualies, they kill a handful of fish before getting access to the elevator. Now who's on this elevator? None other than Dead Fish. You know, the person who made all of the music for Octo expansion? Well, not the actual person, but okay, obviously real-world people make the Splatoon music, but then the music is categorized under in-universe bands. Dead Fish is one of these artists, and they're a sanitized Octoling. Whatever, all that matters is that they're here now, and they're chill. Their real name is Oct, and they claim that they have a past with Marina. They also reveal the core of this game's story, lore, and gameplay. Color chips, and the palette. But for now, all 8 knows is that if you put chips into the palette, you get buffs. After this, Oct acts as the elevator operator for the rest of the game. Must be a lot of work since the elevator only goes up 1 floor at a time. After going through 10 floors, the gang finds Marina tangled up in a weird VR chamber, and she's probably pretty much definitely possessed. Hey 8, remember what you did the last time someone was possessed? How about you do that again? The machine gets blown up, freeing Marina, but also releasing the AI manifestation of the concept of order who wants to take over the world. Oh, did I forget to mention? In Inkopolis Square, the place where Splatoon 2 takes place, everyone is brain dead. And this is all thanks to this Order AI. I know this because Marina gives us a little exposition dump after Order kicks us out of the tower. We're in the members, a VR type deal made by Marina. Missed opportunity to make this a VR game.
Give this thing a purpose already, Nintendo.
The Order AI trapped a bunch of people's minds and memories in here, including 8, Pearl, Marina, Oct, and all of the people who are spacing out. It wants to take away everyone's free will, using the members to rule the world, achieving true order. The only way to stop it is to climb to the top of the tower and beat it up. So you do. I already did the screaming joke with Octo expansion, just know that you beat up a lot of fish until you get to the top. This game is very gameplay focused, but luckily for me, this is the story section. At the top of the tower, 8 and the gang confront Order, and when it hears that Marina, its creator, is against it, it freaks out and turns into a big octopus called Overlorder. At least it's a better name than just Order. 8 and Pearl fight it while Marina tries to hack into the members to shut it down, but Overlord is enough to stall for enough time to take over everyone's free will, and all seems lost. But then Marina and Oct play a really cool song. To be fair, this isn't the first time a song has had supernatural plot-changing abilities, but it didn't feel so plot-devicey back then. For those who don't know, there's this song called Calamari Incantation, which is powerful enough in-universe to have people immediately question their faith. That's why Octolings are suddenly playable in Splatoon 3. But that all takes place in the background and is explained in lore logs. This just comes out of nowhere. Is it because the creator of the simulation made it? Is it because it's unorderly? I don't know. All that we know is that Pearl is really feeling the vibe. Then she does her iconic killer whale, blows up the top of the tower, we gather the 7 Inkling color chips and blow up Overlord, revealing its third and final form, Smallest, who's just a silly little guy. Then the gang rides an elevator out of the simulation, before immediately going back to free the rest of the people trapped there. And then, that's it. DLC done. But while you're saving those people, you get a whole bunch of lore.
Just keeping my options open.
Oh boy, lore! My favorite way to excuse these games barely having an actual story. This time we're gonna work our way backwards because Side Order's lore is the simplest. It's just how and why the Memverse was made. Marina made it to restore the memories of the sanitized Octolings, which explains why Oct was in there. To make it, Marina hired Octoling scientists that she used to know from the evil Octoling military base. No way that could backfire. There's also some stuff about Oct and Marina being friends back then, but nothing too jaw-dropping. But the other 2 games?
Well, let's take a look.
Splatoon 3 not only has the standard lore scrolls, but it also has lore logs! Yay! The scrolls don't have too much besides explaining why Small Fry goes big at the end of the game, but like I said, I made a whole other video on that, so I'll try to say it simply. Each member of Deep Cut comes from a tribe, and the tribes have supernatural powers when they come together. That's cool, I guess. It doesn't add a whole lot to the wider Splatoon world, but it's a fun concept. Besides that, all these scrolls have are potential foreshadowing about the marigolds and a dead body.
Gross, it's spilling everywhere,
The good stuff is in the Alterna logs, aka Mr. Grizz's backstory, aka the end of humanity. They describe the sea levels rapidly rising and lots of natural disasters leading to mass extinction event, wiping out most mammals, including humans. But a lucky few were able to survive underground, creating a society led by scientists, Alterna. Hey, that's where the game takes place. Also, this isn't really important to the lore, but the scientists, quote, weren't immune to nostalgia, so they started 3D printing stuff from before they died, which includes the giant Moai heads. Who's nostalgic for the Moai heads? I get making a fake sky, but who on the research team visited Easter Island once and won't shut up about it? They also made Orca. Oh, did I not mention Orca? The omniscient recording computer of Alterna? The thing that's there throughout every level? Well, it doesn't really matter. The new young scientist wanted to leave gross old Alterna by building an awesome, cool rocket ship. Oh, by the way, the fake sky's made of, get this, mind-reading liquid crystals from inside of squids. And when the scientists made a rocket and tried to test it, the jets made the crystals go crazy, causing the walls to partially collapse and kill off the rest of humanity. You got rid of Alterna, are you happy? The crystal juice fell into the waters below Alterna, and the sea creatures absorbed it. But because those crystals read the minds of humans, they carried human emotions. This caused the sea creatures to eventually evolve into Inklings and Octolings. All of Splatoon comes from this one event.
Maybe they're right. The world would be better off without humans.
Anyways, back to that darn bear. Turns out that other people who actually knew how to make rockets were able to launch into space to find a planet to replace Earth. They took lots of animals with them and put them into cold sleep so they could survive no matter how long the journey took. Kinda like if Noah's Ark was awesome. But then the ship got hit by an asteroid, so the scientists turned it around, but they ran out of fuel before they could reach Earth, leaving the rocket to float around for 10,000 years. It eventually got back to Earth, crash landing and killing everyone on board, except for a certain bear. Mr. Grizz had been conscious during his coma, which I guess somehow made him super intelligent. He found his way to Alterna and fixed it up a bit. Then he got some of the crystals. Remember? The mind-reading liquid crystals from inside of squids? Well, he combined it with his own fur, which created fuzzy ooze, which, as a reminder, is a substance that can turn anything into a mammal. But he also needed golden salmon eggs to make it. So he started an entire business employing the Inklings and Octolings he wanted to kill to have them gather golden eggs from salmon spawning grounds to fuel his stockpile of fuzzy ooze, which, if you recall, is mind-reading liquid crystals from the inside of squids combined with hyper-intelligent bear fur and the golden eggs of evolved salmons collected by evolved humanoid squids and octopi employed by the hyper-intelligent bear that wants to turn them into mammals by putting the ooze into a rocket, flying it into space, and then crashing it onto Earth.
Yeah. This franchise makes perfect sense. Moving on.
Octo Expansion's lore is very character-focused, being in the form of chat logs between Pearl, Marina, and Cuttlefish. Quick history lesson on Splatoon 2, Marina was the first Octoling to not be outwardly evil in the series. This confused the entire community, causing lots of theories and speculation and all that other annoying fanbase stuff. Pro tip, avoid fanbases at all costs. Octo Expansion gave a lot of really cool answers for all of that. You know how Cuttlefish really hates Octarians? Well, when Pearl reveals that Marina is an Octoling, Cuttlefish acts like an average old political guy online and starts digging into her past to find dirt. He finds her personal life from the Octarian army and shows it to Pearl, revealing that she made lots of Octarian super weapons and was part of Octavio's Wasabi supply unit. It also shows that she came to the surface because she heard the Calamari incantation, which, as I mentioned earlier, frees Octolings from the years of brainwashing they've had to go through. Once Cuttlefish realizes this, he parents her because he bases who his friends are on who likes his song. He even says, and this is a direct quote, I swear I'm not paraphrasing, "I guess she's okay for an Octo." I told you this was Nintendo's darkest franchise. When Marina comes back, Pearl and Cuttlefish talk about it with her, and I guess Cuttlefish is a shy species because he says that he, another quote, doesn't see species. His first line of dialogue in 2 different games is, "The Octarians are coming." He's not beating the allegations. He even tries to pull the "I have an Octoling friend" card with Agent 8. Dude, you're just digging your hole deeper.
Oh, that reminded me of the art. Oh, why did I have to write that word?
The rest of the chats just talk about how Off the Hook was formed, basically saying that Pearl found Marina in the middle of nowhere and liked her beats enough to agree to start a band with her. There's a bit more than that, but it's not worth going into here.
And that's a summary of the story and lore of all 3 of the games, and it only took me... I'm gonna go ahead and give Side Order the 1 points, because it kind of just sat on the bench and watched the big kids fight. Now these other 2 are going to be a bit harder, because I see it as a fight between the introduction of some of the series' most lovable and iconic characters, versus a plot that was set up in the game prior that also helps tie in the origin of the entire series. But I'm going to give Splatoon 3 2 points and Octo Expansion 3, because I think Splatoon 3 has less plot holes than Octo expansion. Like, the story on its own is all neat and dandy, but it doesn't really tie into the gameplay. Like, I doubt humans were using ink wells activated by balloons 1,000 years ago. Oh, did I not mention that yet? Well, I guess it's finally time that we take a look at some game. Oh, I thought that was gonna say gameplay. My bad. I'm separating stages and bosses so I can go more in depth on each of them, which normally I would clump them together, but I have a lot to say about bosses. But before we do that, we've gotta cover the stages.
Side order loses this round. I really did enjoy it, but the stages themselves are interchangeable. The game reuses most maps for each of its 5 different game modes, while Octo Expansion and Splatoon 3 stages have more focused level design. So instead, I'm just going to take into account the stage types, just so Side Order has a fighting chance. There's portals, where you have to destroy enemy spawners, tower control, where you have to power the turbine all the way to an end goal, ink zones, where you have to maintain control over certain areas, infinity balls, where you have to bring them to end goals, and runaway, where you have to catch super fast fish. Now we link them to the 5 stages of grief. For denial, we have tower control, because this isn't tower control, this is turbine escort. You see, to move the tower, you have to stand on it, but to move the turbine, you have to shoot it. Completely different! I do like how the turbine also acts like a sprinkler to damage enemies, and there are checkpoints that push the turbine back and make it harder to get through, forcing you to be stationary for a while, which allows enemies to catch up to you. But besides that, it's just tower control. For anger, we have ink zones. Yeah, it might be another ripoff of a multiplayer mode, but at least it doesn't try to hide it. It's angering because having to juggle taking out enemies and maintaining the zone is one of the hardest challenges in this game. Not to mention that along with enemies attacking you, there are also enemies who serve the sole purpose of taking over the zone, so if you don't deal with them quickly, you can kiss your zone goodbye. Also, this game mode probably has the hardest specific stages. There's a stage where you have to go between 2 different zones on different sides of the stage, and that might be the hardest level in the game. There's also one where it's just the zone on a small platform with a lot of portals in front of you. There's one with snipers always watching you. There's the one where—
Stop! I don't want to give footage of all of that.
If you get an Ink Zones level, there's a good chance you're gonna get mad, and that's part of the reason why I think they're pretty cool. For bargaining, we have portals, because please, it's so close to popping, let me have it, please! I think that this mode is designed to try and coax you into trying to keep destroying the portals, even with enemies swarming all around you. It does this by having the portals explode on destruction, wiping out everything around it. This is a really cool risk versus reward mechanic, especially with the portal getting harder to hit the more damage it takes. But a lot of weapons can cheese this. The triple ink strike can instantly take out the portals if you land on 3, and if you get enough quick charge chips on a sniper, you can explode them in a few seconds.
What did I just say?
I think this strategic aspect makes this mode all the more fun. At the beginning of a run, a portal level might be stressful, but that makes it all the more satisfying when you're able to easily breeze past one later on. Also, this mode ties into the final boss, but that's for later. Depression is the fleeing mode? Runaway mode? It's the mode that has the fish with wheels. This one's depression because it's not really difficult, it's just kind of annoying. I'm not calling them that. Wheelfish can see you from halfway across the map, can detect when you're shooting at it, and are stupidly fast, only slowing down when they turn. And I can tell the devs knew how annoying this was because they tried to balance it out. The Wheelfish has particles coming out of it that make it harder to lose track of. There are a lot of fun special levels for this game mode, and they had the player ink slow it down, letting you set up traps. But a lot of this is countered when you get this mode on big stages that allow the Wheelfish to go in 3 or 4 different directions depending on where it feels like going. I think that the best way to get through these levels is by abusing specials, which the Wheelfish usually can't see coming. This mode just feels like a chore, but I still want a plush of the Wheelfish. I like its design. And finally, for acceptance, we have Infinity Balls, a callback to Octo Expansion's 8-ball levels, which we'll be covering right after this. But the Infinity Ball levels are probably the easiest ones. You don't have to worry about losing the ball because there are invisible walls around the stage, then Goal will pull the ball towards it and the ball does damage to the enemies it hits. There's also this cute little detail where the normally big, scary enemies are distracted by the ball and go after it instead of the player. It's really endearing, until they knock the ball out of the goal right before it's about to go in. But besides that, its mode-specific stages aren't anything too special, and there isn't much else left to say about it. So that leaves us with 2 pretty ordinary modes, 2 pretty fun modes, and one that makes me want to quit every time I go through it. But like I mentioned a few sentences ago, the Infinity Ball levels are direct callbacks to Octo Expansion's 8-ball levels. So let's go ahead and check those out. You know, maybe the skip mechanic isn't that bad of an inclusion. Octo Expansion is notorious for easily being the hardest Splatoon campaign. I focused on that so much in my original comparison video that I forgot to talk about Splatoon 3's difficulty and gameplay in general. So glad that video did well. That's the reason I said Infinity Ball mode was acceptance, because you're expecting it to be as bad as the 8-ball levels, but once you realize it's Side Order's easiest mode, you're quick to accept it. Oh, but it's not just 8 balls, you also have crap like Girl Power Station, which is a 1v15 where you're not just trying to kill your opponents, you're also trying to protect a comically weak orb before they can get to it. But you're surrounded from all sides, so when you're defending on one side, you can get snuck upon from the other. Although I'll admit, those are the examples that everyone uses when giving examples of this game's difficulty. The rest of the game is mostly filled with fun levels that have unique level designs instead of using the typical Splatoon format of get to the end while we explain new mechanics to you. So everyone who bought it probably already knows how Splatoon works, so they don't need a tutorial. This lets the devs focus more on making the levels fun, which means they can also make them more challenging. There are still a few point A to point B levels, but they're few and far between, and most of them have at least one unique mechanic or gimmick to keep things fresh. There's one where you have to kill enemies while not shooting out too much of the floor beneath you, which is just spleef, but knowing that just makes it funnier that the devs got it in. There's also another one where you have to stop all the platforms at a certain time, which isn't even anything too crazy, but the way it's executed just makes it so memorable. But what about Side Order? How difficult is it? When I was talking about portals, I mentioned how towards the end of the run, you'll start to feel overpowered. But the game has a way to balance it out, level difficulties. The further up the tower you get, you'll start getting harder levels, and if you try to avoid them by choosing easier ones, you'll only end up getting more difficult ones. This can include rigorous levels and dangers. Dangers add more suffering to levels, which can make the level way harder, like the one that covers the entire level with enemy ink, but other times it just locks up your drone. So unless you're using the drone-based meta, it shouldn't be too much of a setback. While the system might work for your first few runs, you have to remember that Side Order is a roguelike, meaning that for each new run, you'll have improved stats. You can get these through Marina's hacking shop, which mostly offers defensive stuff like increased max lives and recovery times. You can also upgrade your drone, and this is where the drone meta comes in. Get max item slots, both abilities that let the drone charge itself, then grind out the drone strike chips, and you're unstoppable. At a certain point, it starts to feel like everything leading up to the final boss is just preparation for it, getting the best color chip buffs possible. The final challenge tries to stop this by giving you less color chip slots depending on how many hacks you have enabled. You think that'll stop me? Give me ink strike and I win. I think I like the way this game does difficulty. Since you have to use different weapon kits to fully complete the game, each weapon will be hard to use for certain people than others. It kinda ties into its pacing, as if it gets too difficult for you, you can just quit. But I don't think I ever got so frustrated that I wanted to quit. I had fun.
3, 2... Okay, time to whine about a different game.
I just remembered more cheap tricks Octo Expansion plays. Target practice while on high-speed rails, having to carefully carve out statues from boxes, having a limited amount of ink, having to dodge enemy fire while being unarmed, and I've been describing Splatoon 3 levels this whole time.
Wait a minute. If those are all Splatoon 3 levels, what have I been playing?
It's pretty obvious that Splatoon 3 was heavily inspired by the positive feedback from Octo expansion. You enter levels the same way, there are a lot of throwback levels, some more obvious than others, and the best part, they borrowed so much from Octo expansion that they could barely figure out how to squeeze it into the game's story. I made a whole other video on that. How did my hairline get even higher? I'll quickly summarize because the story segment was already too long. In universe, the Splatoon 3 levels are missions to help Alterna's computer in return for power eggs. But that raises the question of why these weapons, objects, and mechanics designed specifically for Inks-based activities would be in human civilization to begin with. To fully understand why this is, we'll need to do a quick in-depth dive into the lore of—
There is no answer! This is the stages section. If you want to hear me talk more about lore, use the timestamps down below and go back to the story section. It will give me more watch time.
Apart from the Octo expansion type levels, Splatoon 3 has a lot of the classic linear route to the end type of level for most Splatoon campaigns, and they aren't as interesting as the Octo expansion ones. There are still some good ones, like this one where the stage crumbles beneath you while you climb to the top, and the levels that feature the new Spider Squid special are really fun, but it just doesn't feel the same as Octo expansion. A lot of Splatoon 3 levels kind of blend together, while most Octo expansion stages feel like a breath of fresh air no matter how long you've been playing for. But then again, I only played like 10 levels during my Splatoon 3 playthrough, so that could also be why.
Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and give Octo Expansion 3 more points, because it doesn't have enough. And with these other two, I'm definitely gonna try to judge them based on their unique levels instead of their bland ones. While I definitely had more fun with Side Order, I think Splatoon 3 has better stages. I mean, come on, every single Side Order level is a floating island. What did you expect? And I know I talked about it way more than I did the other two, but that's because I've been neglecting it for this whole video. So Side Order gets 1, and Splatoon 3 gets 2. And now it's time for what will probably end up being my favorite subject to talk about. The thing you've probably all not been waiting for. It's time to talk about the— Finally! A category where Octo expansion doesn't sweep!
Splatoon 3 has the best bosses in the series, and if you disagree with me, you're wrong. For one, every single boss is an actual character that plays into the story in some way, unlike the toasters you have to fight in other campaigns. The main idol group of the game secretly being bandits that you have to fight is such a silly little idea, but it works to make the bosses so much more memorable. The only downside is that you might end up skipping a third of the game to get to a certain one like I did. They're also all fun bosses to fight. Sure, they aren't very challenging due to suffering from being a base game Splatoon campaign, except Fry, for some reason, her fight is harder than the final boss. She commands a horde of 2 different kinds of eels, normal and masked, the latter of which you have to damage enough to fling back at her. The eels have 4 different attacks, and you have to pray that it's 100 eel vision, because all you have to do is shoot the right eels that are conveniently floating above you. There's also eel downpour, which is a bit more annoying to deal with because you can't tell which eels are masked, but it's still manageable. But the other 2 suck for their own reasons. The Great Moray transformation has the eels get into a big group and home in on the player. They're so tightly clumped together that you can't tell if you're aiming at a masked eel or not, and even if you are, you're too focused on avoiding the eels to do anything about it unless they're at the very back. And then there's the worst attack, Moray Whirlpool. Fry releases lots of eels to rapidly spin around her, so fast that it's nearly impossible to kill them, let alone tell if they're masked or not. And even if you see them coming, they're going way too fast for you to dodge them. You have to predict their pathing if you have any hope of not getting hit. This boss is torture, and I think that's pretty cool. Even the game's weakest boss, both in terms of difficulty and impact, feels necessary. I'm talking about DJ Octavio, the first boss in the game. Even with it being easy, it still manages to have fun mechanics that keep you on your feet. The mech having a vacuum that you have to use small fry to clog up makes you feel smart the first time you figure it out. At least I think so. I've played this campaign 3 times, so I don't remember.
You played Splatoon 3 times? That's hilarious.
Shiver is another pretty easy boss that makes up for it through creativity. I mean, you're fighting a shark, that's cool enough on its own, but then it starts creating big torpedoes and firing hyper beams at you? This fight obviously puts spectacle over difficulty, which is a bit of a bummer. For reference, Fry is the first of the main 3 bosses you fight. Going from her to Shiver can definitely give you some whiplash. but luckily, I think that Big Man's boss fight is a perfect in-between. Also, I'll go ahead and mention the whole fight is a reference to the Phantom Manta from Mario Sunshine, which is really awesome for people who have played Mario Sunshine. The way this fight works is that Big Man sinks himself into the ground and divides himself when you do too much damage to him, until eventually his silhouette gets too small and he has to pop out for a breath of fresh air. It sounds simple enough, but especially in the final phase, this fight gets chaotic. Everywhere Big Man and his copies go is covered with enemy ink, so if you take too long to find the real Big Man, the entire arena will get covered, making it nearly impossible to move around. But these copies don't just move around, they're loaded. They can use ink strikes, torpedoes, and other bombs, which on its own doesn't sound too bad, but when Big Man has been split up into a whole bunch of copies, you're getting something thrown at you every second or two. This pressures the player to find the real Big Man as fast as possible. All of these aspects combined creates a fight that has just the right amount of challenge to make it fun for newcomers and veterans. Also, funny detail, when you're going to the final boss, each member of Deep Cut helps you in some way. Fry has her eels create a spiral out of Alterna, Shiver has her pet shark give you a ride, but Big Man, not having a pet, just gives you a helmet to wear. How sweet of him, giving us the only thing that's actually useful in the fight itself. But before we get to that fight, I think I'm just gonna quickly cover all of Sato and Octo Expansion's bosses.
Hold on. I can't explain.
The reason I'm doing this is because I want to highlight the similarities between Splatoon 3's final boss and Octo Expansion's final boss, but I can't do that until I cover Octo Expansion's bosses, but I don't want to just tack on Side Order at the end.
I just gotta give it a chance.
Side Order's first boss is at the end of its fake-out intro and is a hypnotized Marina. This is basically just an easier version of the final boss, but instead of being a big scary octopus, it's Marina. Same thing. So just take what I say about the final boss and imagine it being 100 times easier. The tower bosses appear in a random order and have two different versions depending on if you fight them earlier or later in the run to keep the difficulty balanced. But because they aren't in any particular order, I'm just gonna...
Oh, good. That was the one I wanted.
The Pinging Martial, or as I like to call it, the Big Ol' Clam. It's a big metal-plated ball that you can only damage the face of. You have to give it a little nudge to start it up, but it gains speed quickly. While it's rolling around, it can also spawn in hordes of enemies, bombs, and other crap to slow you down. You have to push it into the bumpers that make the clam open, making it easier to attack. It gets smaller and smaller until it pops, and that's the boss. There's not much charm or things to smile at it, except maybe when the bumpers fling the thing into the air. For obvious reasons, this is my least favorite boss in the DLC. But Parallel Cannon is not much better. This fight consists of a bunch of AI Inkling robots that act as the tower's guards. But unlike Octo Expansion's Girl Power Station,
I'm still not over it, and I don't think I ever will be.
These Inklings are released one by one at the exact same spot, letting you pick them off one by one pretty easily. If you miss one when it first spawns in, it might try to hide from you in its ink, but luckily, there's a drone pointing a bright red laser at it at all times, making it pretty easy to notice, even from a distance. So as long as you don't ignore them and the final 5 all make it onto the stage at once, this fight should be a breeze. Now let's talk about my favorite boss from the DLC, GLaDOS, or as the feds call her, the Asynchronous Rondo. I feel like this boss has the vibe that most players were hoping the whole campaign would have. Dark, mysterious, a little creepy. Just like GLaDOS! The arena is completely dark except for a singular rotating light, and if it catches you, it just spits out a bomb or something, but that's not the biggest of your concerns. It can randomly do a big attack where it spins around and spits out homing missiles, which can easily be dodged by hiding behind a wall. But it can also spit out bombs, which flank walls, pushing you closer towards the machine, or death beams, which can go through the barriers and forces you to basically play jump rope until it's stunned. So you better hope you don't have a bunch of enemies on your tail. This is my favorite boss fight because of the atmosphere, and while the actual gameplay is better than the previous two, there's definitely still room for improvement. And luckily, the final boss delivers on both of those. Introducing Overlorder. First off, his arena has the dark, gloomy aesthetic that GLaDOS had, and for the gameplay, well, it's basically just an extended version of the Marina fight from the fake-out intro, so just take what I said about her and imagine it being 100 times harder. Oh, you need a refresher? Okay, in the Marina fight you have to destroy 4 portals to lower the barrier around Marina, all while she throws enemies and bombs and the rest of the projectile list you've come to know and love. Once the barrier is down, you damage the gunk she's trapped in until she falls out of it, fight over. Now let's see what Overlord does with this concept. He basically takes Marina's whole fight and stretches it into 3 phases. For his first phase, there's only 2 portals instead of Marina's 4, but they spawn a whole lot more fish. After that, there are 3 portals, but now when you try to damage them, they'll try to move out of the way. Good luck catching up to them while being swarmed. Overlord is throwing bombs, vomit, tentacles, death rays, and more fish at you. And then, in his third phase, he has 4 portals operating, all spawning fish, all running away from you, all while he's throwing his crap at you. This phase is a nightmare, and as I mentioned earlier, is what you spend your entire run preparing for. If you manage to get through that phase and it's your first time fighting him, you'll get a cool 4th phase where you get to use all of the color chips in the game at once, easily decimating Overlord. It's a fun reward to make up for the PTSD you'll be having from phase 3.
I know I said GLaDOS was my favorite boss, but I was just talking about the bosses in the tower. We all know Overlord is my real favorite. But now it's time for Octo expansion to get humbled, because most of its bosses are just harder versions of the bosses from Splatoon 2. And yet, I still have to review them.
Octo expansion takes Splatoon 2's bosses, sanitizes them, and spits them back at you, which is a shame because the original bosses the DLC does have are some of the series' best. I guess that's what all the budget went into. But before we can get to them, this is the Octo Oven XXL, the more difficult version of the Octo Oven from Splatoon 2. For reference, I'll quickly summarize that fight. You have to wait for all of the slices of toast to pop out of the oven, then climb up them and splat the tentacle on top. It has a few other attacks too, but the XXL replaced them with new ones. It added a few snipers atop the toaster and sprinklers to cover more area. To be honest, I do like the XXL's fight. I think it has just the right amount of challenge, which is something all of Octo expansion does well, but in the back of my head I know I'm fighting a souped up boss from a previous campaign, so I don't know if I should look at it as an original boss or judge it for being a repeat. Let's keep that question in mind while we take a look at some of the DLC's other bosses, like the Octostomp Redux, a tougher version of the Neo Octostomp from Splatoon 2, which just so happens to be a tougher version of the Mighty Octostomp from Splatoon 1.
Should I just review 1 and 2 now? No, I shouldn't.
I'm not going to talk about the fight from Splatoon 1 because it's basically just the Neo Octostomp's first phase. You just have to wait for it to faceplant, then ink its sides, swim up, and explode its tentacle. But in phase 2, it gets a cover that makes it to where you can't ink its sides and you have to hit a strap to remove it. Then in phase 3, it extends itself to have 3 faces, making it a lot easier for it to hit you during its rush attack. After dealing with that, the fight's over. So how does Octo expansion add to this boss? Bubbles. When he falls down, there's bubbles. When he gets more faces, there's bubbles. But these bubbles are more of an annoyance than an actual threat. It also has 3 straps now instead of 1, which just kind of makes the fight take a bit longer. This is by far the laziest update to a boss, but that shouldn't be a surprise, it is a copy of a copy already. But these are the 2 worst bosses from the DLC. The other 2 recycles may not necessarily be more creative, but they're definitely more fun. In Splatoon 2, the Octo Shower was my least favorite boss.
I'm a Nintendo fan. Is it any surprise my least favorite boss is a shower? Well, it should be. I'm a very hygienic boy.
You have to hit the Octarians carrying it, but they're so high up the devs made you play this level with a sniper. This makes it really annoying to move around because you have to charge it up before you can fire it. So it's really hard to try to dodge when the shower uses its machine gun, its death beam, and especially its iconic ink shower. And sometimes you get up right next to it and are about to take out one of the Octarians, but it just goes to the other side of the map. Great! But luckily, Octo expansion fixes this by giving you a jetpack, which makes the fight feel more like a high-speed air battle than trying to duck hunt with a UFO in the way. It also helps that the jetpack's gun doesn't have a charge, so you can fire instantly. But the jetpack isn't so overpowered that the fight feels unbalanced. This is still a pretty hard fight with all the shower can throw at you, in addition to its increased speed. It's crazy how all it took was a jetpack to turn my least favorite fight in one campaign into one of my favorites in the next. This next fight pulls in a similar trick, the Octo Samurai. In Splatoon 2, it's a pretty mediocre boss. It's just a big Octarian on a unicycle slowly inching towards you, occasionally trying to crush you, while you're having to spam vertical attacks with your paint roller. This could have been a better boss just by making the arena smaller, because this fight's biggest problem is the samurai's range versus yours. So Octo Expansion fixes this by making the arena smaller, right? Nope. It's still the same size, but the changes made somehow justify this, increase the difficulty, and make the boss actually enjoyable, and it all comes down to one ball. For this fight, you're placed into a ball that can be charged and detonated. This forces you to get closer to the boss to damage him, but if you don't time it just right, he'll get a hit on you. But you're in a ball, what's there to worry about? There are no walls around the arena, and this ball can get flung. It's easy for just one hit to send you flying off stage to your death, making this one of, if not the hardest of the 4 Metro bosses. Using this specific special is such a creative and easy way to fix this fight, and I don't know whether that's a pro or a con. Forcing you to get up close to the boss completely gets rid of the problem with you being able to outrange him, as you have to be right by him to do good damage. But at the same time, that's all they changed. This is the exact same fight from Splatoon 2. So let's bring back that question from earlier. Should these bosses be judged for being copies? I think it depends on if they were able to better the original boss while also putting a creative spin on it. So for Octo Oven XXL and Octostomp Redux? No way. The devs made very minor changes to those fights that did make them harder, but it feels so forced. And I get that the bosses being recycled in the first place was probably forced due to budget, but it's hard to excuse these two when the Shower and Samurai are so well executed. The way the devs put these twists on otherwise pretty dull bosses makes it feel like they had fun implementing it too, and I think that validates their reuse, which means so far, only half of these bosses are up there. But now it's time to cover the final section, both of Octo Expansion and of Splatoon 3. From a glance, it might be hard to see how these finales are similar, if you're half blind. They each start with a series of connected mini-levels, which I'm not going to cover because that's more of a discussion for the stages category, but then after that, you have a more traditional boss fight. In Octo Expansion, you have Possessed Agent 3, which is basically a 1v1, except your opponent has a bunch of specials and 1,000 hours in the game. I like this part where Agent 3 goes up on this moving platform and fires a killer whale at you, and the only way to stop them is by throwing up a bomb. It makes you come up with the solution on the spot. There's not even any dialogue telling you what to do. But this is the first non-clone boss of Octo Expansion, and it's just against the Inkling? That Inkling specifically? Wait a minute. Is that cuttlefish tied up in the back?
Don't know. It's coming back. Oh, I thought I repressed it. I should also mention this boss has its own copy, which is the secret final boss, the hardest boss in the entire series. It has more bombs and specials at a faster rate, and gives you less places to hide. And it's called Inner Agent 3. Oh, go back to the other one.
The difficulty of Possessed Agent 3 more than makes up for any creativity it's lacking. But also, you're fighting yourself from Splatoon 1 possessed by a goo creature. I think that's pretty creative. For Splatoon 3's traditional boss, we have Mr. Grizz's first 3 phases. It's the boss where you fight an evil sentient bear on a rocket in space by collecting golden salmon eggs to feed to your pet fish so it can eat the bear's ooze, all while the bear spits torpedoes at you, fires massive death beams, throws missile strikes, and tries to throw you off the rocket. Agent 3, I think that creativity-wise, Mr. Grizz has you beat. Now this fight is nowhere as difficult as Agent 3, it's not even as hard as Fry. As long as you're patient and pay attention to your surroundings, it's not too tricky. But hey, that might just be the pro Splatoon player in me talking. After Agent 3 and Mr. Grizz, both games end with a spectacle boss. These are fights that have you juggle a new mechanic with the skills you've learned throughout the rest of the game. In Octo Expansion, this is Commander Tartar's statue. It's not really a fight, there aren't any of the usual cronies to deal with. It's more of a race against time to detonate 30 bombs on a statue in 3 minutes. If you don't know exactly where to go and when to go there, this is going to be a very tough stage. Because if you miss one, you better make time to go back and get it at the end. It's an incredibly unique take on a final boss, and its environment makes it a lot better. You're in the middle of an ocean during sunset, making the area surrounding the statue so pretty. This probably isn't intentional, but it encouraged me to finish faster just so I could admire it. I get space is a neat conceptual location, but when you're actually there, what's there to look at? Asteroids? Stars? Two titans fighting? How about all of that on one screen? Splatoon 3's Spectacle Boss has you control DJ Octavio's mech to suck up the remaining fuzz from Mr. Grizz so you can fire it back at him.
Holy crap, that's a reference to the first boss where you had to clog up the vacuum with small fry. It's all connected.
You have to navigate through big balloons to get to Grizz, and when you get too close, Octarians spawn on the ship, forcing you to pop out of your cockpit to deal with them. The first time this happens, it only takes a few seconds to deal with, but by the time you're trying to get in that final suck, you'll have 5 bad guys spawning on you all at once. Now, does this translate to it being harder? Not really, but if you don't deal with them fast, they can take a good chunk out of that timer. I can still comfortably finish with 30 to 40 seconds left, and like I said, this is a spectacle boss. It's going for more style than difficulty. If you've been trying to listen to this as a podcast, I'm gonna need you to look at this for a second because I can't just explain it. I prefer grinding rails around a statue in the middle of the ocean during sunset to watching two titans fighting on a rocket ship in space.
That might be a hot take, but I've come to appreciate nature on my break. But that's not enough to redeem Octo expansion for its previous bosses, which means the king has been dethroned. Splatoon 3 gets 3 points, which still isn't enough to win, but still, I'm sure the devs got a real good chuckle because I gave it 3 points. I'm also going to give Octo expansion 2 points because while it has some bad bosses, it also has some of the best ones in the series, which sadly means Side Order only gets 1 point. A lot of the boss's gameplay and designs are just really forgettable. I'm talking about Big Clam and AI robots. GLaDOS, you're clean. And that's all of the difficulties I have to cover. Thank goodness. I've said difficult 18 times, written 12,000 words in this script, and now it's time for the... So in the end, we have Side Order in last place with 5 points, Splatoon 3 in second with 8 points, and Octo expansion in first with 11. Now, does this mean Octo expansion is objectively the best campaign? No, because all that matters is what you enjoy doing. Like, if I was stuck on an island for the rest of the time, I'm taking Side Order and grinding out a high score till I die. In fact, I probably like Side Order more than Splatoon 3. Curse you and your stupid bosses and lore. What I'm trying to say is that I definitely have a bias towards Octo expansion, but that's just my opinion. Answers will vary from person to person. We shouldn't just judge people for what they like and don't like. No mere human can just say, yep, that one's the best, and have everyone agree with them. Which is why I got a super intelligent AI from the government, plugged the campaigns into it, and had it run tests on not just these categories, but a whole lot more. Music, graphics, post-game, playtime, and more I don't even think the human brain can comprehend. And I have all of the results on this note card. Oh boy. Okay. It is my pleasure to declare that the best Splatoon campaign of all time is... What do you want? I'm trying to demo my new AI tech startup.
Dude, check the news. It doesn't even matter what channel.
Okay, can I finish this
No,
first?
no. Just check the TV. It doesn't
Okay,
matter.
geez,
Just check the TV.
Breaking news from the news division of the local police force, PWAPNOWASA, a clever acronym for people who arrest people named Owen who are Splatoon addicts.
Ah, dang it.
You know something? I went through a lot to get Owen that prescription. I went through so much. And he's back on his Splatoon thing. You know, he didn't even touch it.
Oh my goodness, Owen's car. Let me just look in here. Oh my god! Crack?
It's all about fent nowadays. Nobody ever wants crack, you know?
And now we go live to his associate on the other side of town.
Owen, I'm at your house, Owen. I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna break into your house. I'm gonna kill you, Owen.
Must be a slow news day or something. Crap. I gotta get out of here. I gotta.